And we're back on the Untold, another day, a new story, a new guest with the ever amazing.
For God's sake. I'm gonna keep giving you the same comment all the time.
The awesome, the great Hussein
Have you ever
Al-Ajaz.
seen wrestling?
Yeah.
Wrestling games. I
Dude,
think
I'm a
you've watched
huge
lot of
wrestling fan.
Ah,
Don't
well,
you know
no wonder,
that?
because you know how to do an introduction. You know when they enter?
Yes.
Anyway, good
Yeah.
day today.
Yes.
Very exciting. Traveling. Are you into
Traveling.
traveling?
If I can teleport and go to any place, yes. But if I need to go by car, plane, sea, or whatever, I hate the traveling part.
Why?
The airport security, the bags.
They did
the
great.
check-in.
They did innovate. The teleportation actually exists.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wanted this.
Oh, then I want to teleport back to LA.
For single cells only.
Single what?
Cells.
Oh.
But
Not-
I'll
okay,
explain about
so-
that later.
Okay.
So for everyone curious, just comment below.
We'll have our special guest right after this. We're back on the show, and we're being joined by a very special guest, a son of a first guest
Exactly.
we had on this show, the very first episode, from Faris ALMussallam, the life coach. We have a world traveler, Faris ALMussallam. Welcome on the show.
Thank you so much. It's
Welcome
nice
to
be
to
here.
this place.
Thank you so much.
Place for inspirational people and
great
a
to
lot
be
of
here.
untold stories.
I don't think I've interviewed two generations,
Exactly. We should have you together.
Together.
There's
the
a
next
first time
episode.
for everything.
First
Yeah.
time for everything.
I'm sure there's a first time to a lot of traveling, a lot of
Yes.
adventures, a lot of exciting stories, which hopefully we'll unbox today.
Yes.
So shall we start by explaining what you do? You're a traveler. You're a world traveler.
Yes.
But perhaps let's be more
Also,
specific.
what's your background
Exactly.
and all that?
Okay. Well, when I say I'm a traveler, the word traveler also has a few connotations, and people usually think traveler means I have a backpack and I'm
Right,
I'm
backpacking
hiking,
all the
I'm
world.
hiking,
Hiking, yeah.
all over the world.
Yeah.
Which is one definition.
One definition.
But there's many different ways that people travel.
Yes.
And the way I travel is I've always had a focus on, let's say, history and culture. And I think that comes from a bit of my own personal history. Growing up, we lived in many different countries from a very young age. So we lived in Turkey, we lived in Morocco, we lived in Tunisia, and then and that's where I graduated high school from. So already growing up, there was lots of mixing with different cultures and different people, and I think that kind of sparked the curiosity and let's say the familiarity of travel. And from there, I moved to the UK for university and for my master's degree, and then I came back here. And
What's your bachelor's and master's in?
I have a degree in advertising management and brand management, and a
Nice,
master's
nice.
in
My
corporate
field.
brand management.
Nice. I love it. Nice.
And I worked in that field for 16 and a half years.
Wow. Wait. Hold
Yes.
up a second.
16 and a half plus 18. You know the GIF with maths?
You look too young for that experience
I'm
right now.
36.
Mashallah.
You're 36.
Mashallah,
I'm
wow.
36.
Okay, mashallah, you look
You
great.
do not tell. Cannot tell.
Surprise.
So-
surprise.
Good genes. Good genes.
You went to the UK, pursued an education over
Pursued
there.
education, moved back here. Obviously, I got into the corporate world. But at the same time, I continued my way of traveling, and subconsciously, I didn't know that it was different from what other people were doing. Even in terms of places, because to me, you know, when I would choose a place like, I'd say, okay, I want to go to Hong Kong. People are like, oh, what are you going to do in Hong Kong? You know, it's,
But there's a
what are
lot
you
to
gonna,
do.
what are you going to eat? What are you going to do? What are you going to see? It's dirty, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Whereas the reality is completely different. And I enjoyed that sort of feedback or those sorts of responses.
Yeah.
And I would feel a sense of satisfaction in
Nice.
kind of proving people wrong, and
Nice.
you know, in terms of the pictures that I
I've
would
been
take
there.
in the
It's
videos.
always
It's not
nice.
And it's not what you
proving
think it
people
is. And then, as fate would have it, I met my current business partner through some mutual friends, and it turns out that we have similar interests in terms of travel. And so we decided, okay, let's try traveling together first.
You're both adventurers.
Yes, we have different, let's say, tastes for adventure. He's a bit more adventurous than I am. He's a bit more gung-ho. But yeah, luckily the first trip worked out. We didn't kill each other. And so we decided to slowly expand it and offer it
Nice.
to the public. And this was the way I traveled on my own for many, many years. I do all the traveling. I do the itineraries myself.
You love it. You just love planning.
I love planning the trips. I love researching the trips. I've got tons of trips just on standby
What was
now.
the first country you traveled to, even as a kid? The first time you've been out of Kuwait?
That would be Turkey.
Turkey.
At the age of 3 weeks old.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Well, we lived in
we'll
Turkey.
go with the
What
next-
do you remember?
Well, no,
Nothing.
but we lived there for 4 years, so
Oh,
I do
wow,
have
nice.
some memories of
Okay.
Turkey, the apartments
Nice.
that we lived in.
I guess the first country you went to above age 5, that would count.
Above age 5.
Like the first country you remember going
Remember going to that trip.
I mean, even as a young kid, I remember. I mean, for example, I was 4 years old when the invasion happened, and I remember, driving to the borders and
right.
going to Saudi Arabia and flying into the UK.
Perhaps I want to ask a question. You said you plan your itineraries. You plan it step by step.
Yes.
Is it okay to solo travel and not plan it? I never plan it.
It depends. It
I
depends.
what
honestly-
kind of
I
trip
love-
you want to go on? You know?
I usually, with my kind of, because I'm so curious, because my kind of traveling, and you said there are many definitions of traveling. My type
Oh,
of
you book the
traveling
ticket
is,
in the hotel and that's it.
I book, honestly, yes. I book a hotel. I have a backpack, rucksack, and I just throw in stuff, the jeans in, the pants in, the shoes in, and I like just walk 25 kilometers every day and just treat each day as if it's just as it goes.
That is a fun way to travel.
Yeah.
I just personally, for me, I don't want to feel like I've missed out on anything. Sometimes you find out about something on the last day,
Oh, that's
or
very
there's
annoying.
something that you have to book in advance
That's
that you
very
want to go to.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to miss out.
So you'd rather do the research and the planning?
I'd rather do the
booking
research,
everything
and
for-
if I know how long I'm going to be
Yeah.
there, then I know what I can do.
Right, and
where.
you still might end up with days where you get to go out and explore yourself rather
Absolutely.
than plan. So you can do mix of both.
Yeah, I try not to overpack my days.
Okay.
So I kind of have a rule for myself to not plan more than 3 things per day, to give myself flexibility. And even those 3 things, something might happen, you get stuck in traffic, something closes,
Absolutely,
etc.
absolutely, yes, sir.
So then you
Things
can
don't
shift
count.
it around. And I always give myself what I call like a buffer day, where one day I put
Yeah.
absolutely nothing,
Nothing.
and I might not do anything on that day because I'm so tired,
Or
or I
a day
might
you can use to explore
to
and
do a
whatever
bit
you
of
want. Yeah.
exactly.
So perhaps the question that also people ask whenever they travel, they would end up going to the commercial places, the places that are not really authentic. When you go to Italy and you don't actually eat authentic pizza or
Right,
pasta.
right.
But anyway, I mean, when you plan your trips, how do you make sure that it's a balance of let's be commercial, but let's also be authentic and local?
Well, like you said, the correct word is balance, because you can
Yeah.
go too authentic.
Yeah.
It depends on your palate as well. For some people, they're perfectly fine going to McDonald's and Starbucks in Paris
Yeah.
and going shopping in the 1 or 2 streets that they know, and that's totally
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
At the same time, you can go extreme the other way. So, for example, you can go to Japan and sleep in traditional hotels where
Yeah.
it's basically a very thin mattress on the floor.
Yeah.
The walls are very thin. Your hosts might not speak any English. The food will be completely Japanese. So it depends
Wow.
on your palate. How much do you want to experience?
Right.
And you could do that probably for a day, but then for the rest of the days, you want to stay in a conventional hotel.
Yeah.
And everything in the end comes down to research.
Right.
For example, people always say, well, this country is extremely expensive, it's off limits for me.
Yeah.
I
You
always
can do research and make it affordable.
well, you can always play around with so many of the variables.
Right.
If you take a taxi every day, obviously
It'll be
it'll be
It's in your
expensive.
control.
Take
It's in your
public
control.
It's in your
transportation,
control.
maybe. Yeah.
If you're gonna go to
5-star hotel, that's
five-star
on you.
hotels, if you're
Yeah.
gonna go to Michelin star restaurants,
100%,
yeah,
100%.
then it's gonna be very
Then it's gonna be
expensive.
very expensive.
These are all variables that you can
It
control.
happened to me recently in Geneva where I just was craving sushi. And then I Googled some sushi places. I found this place right beside my hotel. It was $20 per piece.
Wow. Just one roll.
Yeah, literally just one per piece. I was like,
Wow.
okay, close the website.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
no.
go to that corner. Anyway.
What was the last trip you've been on?
The last trip I was on, well, I recently came back from Abu Dhabi,
Okay.
which was a kind of half work, half pleasure.
All right.
Sort of
Maybe the trip
like a
before that
decompressor
was-
before
okay.
Ramadan. The previous trip was to Algeria,
Algeria.
which was my second visit there.
All right.
Tell
us about
We
Algeria.
had an absolute blast.
Yeah.
I mean, a big part of the allure of Algeria is that it's so unknown,
Nice.
and it is so misconstrued
Right.
in the media. So if you say Algeria, you usually hear war, terrorism. There's nothing there.
We're misinformed
The
about
people are
Misinformed,
unfriendly. They're
But it's
misinformed.
the opposite.
And it's the complete opposite. We
Right.
took a group of 7 people with
Wow,
us,
nice.
and we saw so many different sides of the country. So we saw the desert, we saw complete
It's a beautiful
intact
country, right?
Roman ruins.
Yeah.
You know, the second Pompeii is
Right.
actually in Algeria. So we saw 2 complete Roman cities. We saw, you know, beautiful French cities, because most of the cities actually
Right.
there were built by the French, and you would swear that you were in southern France
Wow.
if you were there. Oh yeah,
And the people there must be very welcoming and nice.
they are extremely welcoming.
Shout
They're
out to the people of
extremely
Algeria.
friendly. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. But
they've-
it's such a shame that people have these kind of like images or stereotypes, and they think that's the reality of the country. But then again, if you actually visit them, which is probably one of the added values of traveling, exposes you to the truth.
Exposing the truth and having you know, the real experience, and being able to say with authority, no, it's not this, it's
Right.
actually this. And you know, when it comes to people, you know, it's such a flexible factor. It also depends on how you treat them. If you're going to go in really arrogant and pushy,
Right.
obviously they're not going to appreciate it, and you're going to have some pushback.
And I think at the end of the day, each trip brings its own cultural exchange. Do you think it's important for people to have that cultural exchange, and what impacts does that have?
It's important to have a cultural exchange because we need to also look at it from the other way. In my travels, you know, when people ask, where are you from? And I say Kuwait. There are the same sorts of negative stereotypes and connotations.
Of course.
Or
You
that
know.
we have to explain where Kuwait is.
Well, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But then when there's a connotation of, oh, is it still at war? Is it this?
Oh, wow.
Is it dangerous? Is it
Yeah.
safe for women? Can
Misinformation
women
again.
drive? You know,
Yeah.
there are still these sorts of
Misinformation,
questions.
yeah.
And this sort of cultural exchange, you know, it goes both ways. It's not just about us exploring different countries, but when we travel, we also understand
We tell
that
them
we,
about where we come from and how
yes,
it is.
because especially in places where Kuwait is unknown,
Right. We
you
make it known to them now.
well, you are the face of the country.
Absolutely representing.
You represent,
Yes.
and you have to take extra care not
How
to
you
offend
come across.
anyone, not to break any rules.
You want to leave
because-
them with a good
With a good
feeling about the
impression.
country, an impression.
Exactly.
Maybe even make them want to come visit us.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Because, I mean, Kuwait is not a country which markets itself
Yeah.
abroad
Right.
in any sort
In
of
any
way.
sort of, yeah.
Not in terms of its tourism, not in terms of its
Yeah.
foreign
We're
investments.
lacking in that department, in
Unfortunately.
a little bit.
I wish, actually, I like what you said. I wish if people flipped the equation rather, because everyone talks about traveling outside,
Right,
traveling
yeah,
outside.
yeah.
It's
There
actually
are
funny.
beautiful things here to come and explore in Kuwait as well.
Well, you know, the one thing that we always do, which is a small gesture, is when we arrive to the country and we always have a certified guide with us, the first thing that we do is we always offer them a sort of a tin of traditional sweets from one of the local shops over here. And food is a really good entryway into
Absolutely.
culture.
100%.
Right, absolutely.
So, for example, when you offer somebody food, you're going to be explaining what's in it, and when you explain what's in
Yeah.
it, then you know what cultures have passed through this area,
Absolutely, yeah. The
which
herbs and
cultures
spices
have
and all that,
influenced
yeah.
local culture.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it needs to go both ways. It's not just about, okay, what can you teach us, but what can we teach them?
No, a lot of people are actually interested in this culture, I believe, honestly. There's, we just think they're not. I have a friend that's literally supposed to visit, and we were thinking with Kuwait, Lebanon, and then she was like, no, she insisted. She was like, I want to come to Kuwait. She's from Switzerland. I want to come to Kuwait because I want to see this beautiful culture. It's different, it's new to me, and she wants to discover
And
it.
unknown.
Yeah, and unknown, and untapped.
And untold.
And untold, and untold.
Do you know how many trips you've been on in your life?
Not how many trips, but I know how many countries I've
How many
visited,
countries is a better
which is
question, yes.
61.
61 countries.
Wow.
Yes.
Could you just go off a random list? Like, no, don't cover the 61, but like...
61.
maybe
Please
that's
don't
it.
name them all, please.
Yeah, just give me like different names.
Okay, well,
Just,
to
but
get an
don't
idea.
mention the most famous one. Like the most is
Unique.
it the exotic is the word?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like,
Let's
Okay,
see what he
well,
does.
I can give you, for example, obviously Algeria,
Yeah.
Uganda, Vietnam,
wow.
Russia, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Panama, Argentina.
what about Singapore?
I've been to Singapore a number
How
of
is it?
times. It's amazing. To me, I give it the nickname of the perfect country.
Wow, Singapore.
And they've managed to achieve that with very, very little.
50 years.
Singapore was a
Is that
Malaysian
the
state.
age of the country?
That's how they built it in 50 years. Singapore.
Well, it was a state of,
Yeah.
as
Of,
part of the Federation of Malaysia.
Yeah.
and it was basically kicked out.
And now it's
they've
its
got
own
very little
independent
resources,
country.
very little natural resources,
100%.
and their the least, if not the least, corrupt countries in the world.
Wow. Well, gotta go there then.
Oh, you'd be
escape corruption in the world. You know?
Get the cash ready, expensive.
And the other good
maybe
thing
not
about
then.
Singapore is that it's basically made up of three cultures: the local Malay, Chinese, and Indian cultures, and how they work together to have one national identity is also something to look up to.
I like it when different people unite together and create a new
100%.
society.
They're a good example.
It's a
They're a very
melting
good
pot.
example.
Yeah, exactly.
A very big melting pot. Sorry.
Exactly.
I guess we'll have a break and
We'll be right back
we'll
with you.
continue this conversation right after
Awesome.
this.
We're back from the break and we can finally continue the conversation. I have one question, all right?
Sure.
If there's one, so I'll ask you the question, one word answers, all right?
Okay.
What can we learn from traveling?
Ourselves.
Oh, I was gonna say everything.
I expected you to say culture. I expected you to say people.
But you find yourself.
So how
you know?
how have you
Well,
learned about yourself?
you
I thought it was a one-word question.
He's back.
Cancel the question.
Please.
Well, at the most basic level, you understand your own limits, your own physical limits, your own mental limits.
Nice.
Absolutely.
You begin to understand how similar you actually are to these people who are supposedly different than you.
Yeah.
They might call things by different names, or they might have they might do things a little bit differently, but we're actually a lot more similar to ourselves. And another thing is, although we do the group trips, but what I also enjoy doing is I enjoy solo
trips.
traveling.
Yes.
And it's
I
really
love
when
them.
you're traveling
Love
on
them.
your own and
Yeah.
when you can enjoy your own company.
Yeah.
That's really...
And meeting new people.
And meeting new
Yeah.
people. I think that's when you begin to really discover who you really are, because you're taken out of your home setting.
Your comfort zone.
Your comfort zone. There aren't the same, let's say, social pressures or molds or templates that people need to fit in, and you're on your own and you're carving yourself. Basically,
That's the best part, honestly. You know what I love about solo traveling is that when you're walking on the street, and if you want to go right, you go right. If you want to go left, you go left.
It's up to you.
No one. You don't have to
No,
ask someone else. You don't have to take. You don't have to ask your friend. Do you want to
go
go
with
left or
the
right?
flow.
You go with the flow, 100%.
you
And
go with your own flow, and you listen to yourself a lot more.
in the middle of a lot of chaos sometimes in your daily life, in the work,
That's the
fast paced.
escape you need.
It is your escape,
Yeah, your
honestly.
escape.
Sometimes it really is.
I totally agree.
Faris, what's the best trip you've had? What's the worst trip you've had, and why?
Oof, I've had many bests, I'd say.
One that stands out the
One that
most.
stands out the most, well, the one that's is still at the forefront of my mind, I would say, would be the last Algeria trip.
Algeria really had its number.
I'll tell you why. I mean, obviously, Algeria. I've been there twice, and the way it all started is because I had this curiosity about Algeria when I lived in Morocco, when I lived in Tunisia.
You lived in those areas?
I lived in Casablanca
how
and I
long?
lived in Tunis, combined 7 years. So 5 in Morocco, 2 in Tunisia.
Doing what?
Well, my dad used to work there.
Uh-huh.
It was part of his job requirements that we move to different countries. So
That's while growing up?
yes.
Yeah?
So I was in Morocco from the age of 10 to 16.
So you went through their schools?
Oh yes. Yeah. I went to an
Oh,
American
that's
school in
different.
Casablanca.
Oh, an American school
An
in
American school in
Casablanca.
Casablanca.
Wow.
And I went to an American school in Tunis as well.
What was the experience like in those schools? Were you in the public system in Kuwait?
No, I went to a British school when I was in Kuwait.
Okay.
But it's a totally different experience
Different,
when you do
right?
it abroad, because
Yeah.
when
the
you're
mixture
part
of
of the,
people
when you're
in
part
that
of the
school.
yeah, I mean we
Yeah.
had a nice
You
mixture
had
when
Americans
I was
probably, you had...
well, even when
all
I was
kinds of people.
even when I was in schools in Kuwait, it was always an international setting.
Yeah, international.
But it's
setting,
one thing
melting
when you're
pot.
part of the majority,
Uh-huh.
and then you move abroad, and
You're
now
in the
you're
minority.
part
You're
of
in
the
the-
minority.
And you have to
Exactly.
fight harder to
And this is
fit
part
in.
this is part of
You were
when I
probably
say
the only Kuwaiti in that school?
I was in Morocco. I was one of two.
Really? There was a second Kuwaiti?
There was a second one apart from my sister.
Interesting. Yeah.
In Tunis, there were a few more simply because it was the
Okay.
capital. There were some diplomats, sons and daughters of
Nice,
diplomats.
nice.
And again, this goes back to discovering who you are. You know, when you're here,
It shapes you.
it shapes
shapes
you.
who you are
You
when
think of,
you're,
okay, who you are, why you are
100%,
who you
100%,
are.
yeah.
So yeah, going back to why
was the
Algeria.
best, yeah.
I mean, obviously I have all this experience of living in North Africa, having the linguistic advantage of speaking the Moroccan dialect as
Right.
well as French. So that really helped me, not only in planning the trips, but even in going about in my daily life over there. And I think that really gave an advantage, especially to the group.
Right.
In terms of helping them out, in terms of translating, in terms of
Okay, I
ordering
see.
off a menu even. It's not as straightforward.
Right.
And what I also enjoyed about that trip in particular is that it was one which really flipped everybody's perception of what Algeria is. Before we start any trip, we always have a group meeting to explain the itinerary. And I always
Nice.
ask the same question, is what made you choose this trip?
Oh, good.
And
What kind of answers you get?
it's pretty much always, I've been curious about this place,
Right.
but I never had a way to get there.
Yeah, and now I do.
So we kind of facilitate
Right.
those sorts of things.
Yeah.
In terms of worst trip,
Yeah. Now.
Um,
There are good days and there are bad days.
The one that sticks to mind, it was actually before we started the company. I don't know if I should mention the place, but I probably
The
shouldn't.
country or
Yeah.
the area?
I probably shouldn't.
Okay.
Continent.
It's in Europe.
It's in Europe. Oh,
Okay.
West,
It's in-
east.
West.
Okay.
West.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
I had some really high expectations over there. It was the only time where, in a major capital city, that I felt unsafe, that I did not feel welcome, and it was just apart from the main.
Why do you think that happened?
I'm shortlisting cities right now.
Why do I think it happened?
He'll
I don't
tell us
know.
after.
I think my mistake is I went with expectations,
Yeah.
and those expectations were not met. So probably
Right.
I was hit harder
Yeah, yeah.
than
Were
if I
you
went with
solo
blank
or were you in a
expectations. I
group?
was solo. I was solo actually.
That adds to the unsafe feeling.
well,
maybe. Especially in that area.
usually,
were in a group,
usually
maybe
it's
it
not
would
an
have
issue.
felt better.
Usually it's not an issue in Western Europe. But I think it was a combination of unsafe and unwelcome.
So you would say you'd never go back.
Never say never.
Never say never.
Never say
I like
never.
that.
But probably not.
Probably not.
Okay.
If I could avoid
I mean,
it,
that's why
would
they say
avoid
just
it.
keep your expectations
But now you know.
mediocre,
You at
normal.
least
Now
you
I
had
know.
that
Exactly.
experience.
Now I know.
Exactly.
Yes,
And you
exactly.
know. You know.
Perhaps one question, because you keep mentioning that traveling helps you understand yourself a bit more all the time. So the question I mean is, before and after traveling, all right, what have you discovered about yourself? So
I've discovered that I'm a quick thinker. I've discovered that I can rely on myself and solve problems when they arise. I realized that subconsciously I'm always thinking of a backup, or okay, if this doesn't happen, then what's plan B, what's plan C, what's plan D.
Yeah.
And you learn from all of the experiences that you have, and you gain this whole wealth of knowledge. I mean, I've been traveling solo since I was at university, so about 18 years now.
Yeah.
And all of these experiences, especially when you're solo, when you don't have a parent or a friend that you can fall back on and ask for help, these sorts of things, they help you mature a lot
Absolutely.
quicker. I think also what helped me as well is that I went to university in the UK, and obviously I lived on my own over there. And those sorts of things, they also help you mature. They make you think of, prioritizing different things.
They build thick skin on you.
They build a thick skin.
Honestly.
Again, it shapes up your character.
It shapes your
and,
character.
And builds.
And I can tell there's a difference between, let's say, I'd say I can tell between a person who has lived in one place their whole life, who has lived in their comfort zone their whole life, and somebody who has, taken the step to leave their comfort zone and build themselves.
And explore different
Exactly.
places.
They're less susceptible to what people would say about them, or
Right.
silly things.
No, we've said this in other episodes. You probably learn more from people than from books, and
Yeah.
and there's so much to learn from people, especially when you meet different people from different countries and different backgrounds, different nationalities.
Absolutely. I'm gonna throw something like a challenging question.
Okay.
There are a lot of travel companies, the ones that help you book your trips, like the ones you have in Run, for groups, or even for solo traveling. They go through traveling agencies.
Yeah.
Why is there a need still in this day and age with online booking and all that, where you can go and do it yourself? Why is there still a need in the market for these kind of agencies? Why do people still need them?
There's two reasons. There are, in my opinion, two categories of countries. There are easy countries and there are difficult countries.
Yeah.
Easy countries are ones where the information is easy to find, where the information is all up to date and current,
Right.
where if you reach out to a company or a hotel or an agency in that country, they will respond to you in a timely manner.
Okay.
Those are easy countries.
What makes the difficult
A
countries
difficult country is
yeah.
where it's extremely hard to find relevant information. It's really hard to find.
Any examples of those countries so we can
For
understand?
example,
Right.
we planned a trip to Uzbekistan for the very first time.
Okay.
We did that trip actually twice, but when we were planning the very first one, we reached out to local companies and agencies over there to inquire about how we can put together an itinerary.
Now, is it difficult for me to go online by myself to book a trip to that country?
It's not difficult.
the planning,
It'll be more time consuming for you. And a lot of people don't have that sort of time.
It's convenience at the end of the day, no?
I
It's
think
convenience.
It's convenience.
Yeah,
Convenience and peace of mind. I want
It's
someone to do
convenience
it.
and peace of mind because if a lot of people don't have weeks and weeks and weeks to plan and to correspond with
Right.
different companies.
And there might be a
different
language
people.
barrier with some
There could
certain
be a language
countries.
barrier.
Yeah.
There could be a cultural barrier in terms of the
Cultural
language.
barrier, yeah.
I mean, when you try to communicate by email with somebody from Japan, it's not a question of language; it's a question of culture.
Right.
Because you might be asking them a question that they might not have the answer to, or they don't want to say no, but what they end up doing is avoiding answering that question
Yeah.
instead of saying no, we can't do this, or you shouldn't do this. But they're usually extremely polite and extremely delicate.
Yeah.
So instead of giving you a direct answer, which they find as almost offensive, they'll just
Right.
avoid answering
They
it.
would avoid
I see,
answering.
I see.
I see.
We're approaching the end of the segment, and we usually like to play a little bit of games, right?
Mind games?
No, not mind games. Not today. Not today. Not today.
It's a different show.
So Ahmed, I'll need your help here. So it's a little
Okay.
bit of a true or false, okay?
Oh,
And it's just to kind of like simplify. We'd like to wrap up the episode with kind of like a summary of what we've done. So, true or false? Solo traveling can teach you a lot.
True.
Okay. Solo traveling is difficult.
False.
Solo traveling is challenging.
True.
It takes a long time to plan a solo travel.
Depends.
Depends where.
Depends.
Solo traveling is more fun than group traveling.
Depends.
Group traveling is more challenging. It's more fun than solo traveling.
True.
Group traveling is more fun than
It's
solo
more
travel.
fun. Yes.
Okay.
You learn a lot by traveling.
Oh, true. Definitely.
And do you learn more from traveling than from books?
Yes. True.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. You have regrets about traveling, true or false?
Regrets? No.
No regrets.
No,
Even to that country you told us about.
Absolutely not, because what I've
You
gained
learned something.
is that I learned
always
something.
learn something.
Exactly, and I can give advice to other people who would like to go.
Game 2 before wrap up. Continue the sentence. One word answer. Traveling.
There better be a prize now.
Traveling makes you learn.
Yourself,
yourself.
I think. Yeah, I think he's
That's
going to say
three words.
yourself.
Okay.
We're completing each other's sentences here.
All right. That's me. That's me. No more questions. All right.
All right. Usually in the wrap up, we allow the guests to have final words and messages or any advice on traveling.
I would say enjoy yourselves, enjoy exploring the world, and see a place for yourself before you judge.
Before you judge.
I love it.
Always.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Faris. It
been a
was
pleasure.
lovely, lovely conversation having you on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll be back for the wrap up.
And here we are back to wrap up this beautiful episode.
Yes, lots of things I learned with this guy.
Yeah.
He's great at sharing stories.
He's such a storyteller, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the best trip you've had?
Honestly, I don't know. This coming to my mind. I've done a lot of solo traveling, but the best trip was going to Scotland, one of the islands. I went on one of the islands, a very small island. No cars are allowed, only bicycles.
Wow.
We put a tent on like a green land.
Wow.
And we just I was with my flatmates, and it was beautiful. I would do it again, honestly.
Well, maybe you and I get to do that next time.
Hopefully. No way.
That's all for tonight's episode. Tune in tomorrow for another episode with a new guest and more stories that will be told on the Untold.